And good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Well, here it is, December the 17th. And that means that I need to make an announcement here. So a week from today is Christmas Eve. I'm not going to record. A week from that is December 31st, which is my birthday, and New Year's Eve. So I'm not going to record for that either. So for the next 2 weeks, we'll have reruns of our morning musings. And with that in mind, number one, I want to wish you a very, very Merry Christmas. And I hope also that you have a fantastic New Year. I always had people tell me, well, when you get older, time speeds up. And boy, were they ever right. Do you remember? I remember for sure. You know, when I was 9, 10, 11 years old, oh man, I just want to be 13 years old. I want to be a teenager. Well, I got to be a teenager and nothing magical happened. Well, you know, puberty kind of kicked in and that was not much fun. But, but anyway, well, then when you're 13, you just can't wait to be 16. Got to get a driver's license, you know, here in the U.S. And man, from 13 to 16, that was the longest period of time, one of the longest periods of time in my life. And then, well, wow, I can't wait to get 18. And then, due to the cost of insurance for driving for a teenager, I really couldn't wait to turn 25. That's kind of the magical year when insurance rates go down on drivers. Okay, turn 25, and then it's like, okay, now what am I waiting for? What's my next goal? Well, I have to tell you, when I turned 50, I was amazed. I was one of those people that I never really thought I'd ever live to be 50 years old. I'm just telling you the truth. Never thought I'd live to be 50 years old. And I did. And the next, shall we say, milestone was when I was getting ready to turn 62. My father passed away suddenly when he was 62 years old. And I'm thinking, well, I made it to 50 and passed. Am I going to make it to 62? I didn't know. It wasn't with a whole lot of, you know, trepidation, but it was, okay, am I going to make it? Well, I made 62. And here we are in the year 2021, and I turned 72 years old this year. And I'm just going, I can't believe I'm turning 72 years old. In my mind, I'm not. In my mind, I'm just as active. I'm enthused about life. I'm enjoying what I do. I love producing these programs. So it's like, okay, 72 years old. I therefore know, you know, as the writer of Proverbs said, 70 is the length of man, but if by grace, so to speak, we make 80, then we're doing pretty good. Well, that means I've only got about 8 more years left. So anyway, all of that said, it's great to be with you, and I'm looking forward to my birthday. I'm actually looking forward to being 72 years old, Lord willing that I make it. And so once again, I will not have a new program for Christmas Eve, and there won't be a new program for December 31st, my birthday. Okay? Just want to let you know that. All right, we are continuing our study of the issue of the challenge of Christ. Jesus said, if I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. And yet, in our world, not only do we have the atheist, the Jews, the Muslims, who tell us that Jesus failed. He lied. Over the last several weeks, I've been engaging with people on the internet. One individual, actually several of them, and I've shared this with you, claimed to have been active Christians, but they abandoned their faith because, in their view, Jesus lied and failed. And when I've challenged them with the challenge of Christ, all that they have said is, see, I told you, he failed. He didn't come. But when I begin to share with them, he never promised to come like you thought he promised to come, they have been literally staggered. Now, I'm not saying that I've changed the mind of any of those individuals. I will say this, one particular individual, after we had discussed a good little bit back and forth, I had shared with him the nature of apocalyptic language, the metaphoric, figurative nature of the language of decreation and the language of God riding on the clouds with a shout, etc. He actually disappeared from the conversation. Now, I can hope and I can pray that he is giving this some really, really serious thought, that he is doing some research. I just don't know. We'll see. On the other hand, he may like the atheist life that says, no restraints, no constraints, I can do anything I want, there's not a God who will hold me responsible. And so, there is that element of the world who openly called Jesus a liar. And I've shared with you the fact that the dispensational world, the futurist world, implicitly, now look folks, I want to be very, very clear here. I have had some people on YouTube accost me and accuse me of lying. Accuse me of making false accusations when I have said the following. The dispensational paradigm accuses Christ of failing and or lying. Now, I have been very careful to point out, and if you have listened carefully, you know this is true. I have been careful to point out I am not aware of any dispensationalist that openly, willfully says, yes, Jesus lied, Jesus failed in his mission. What I have said is, pardon me, while 99.9% of all dispensationalists are wonderful, God-fearing people who love the Lord, who love his word. And listen, I believe that firmly. I never impugn the honesty or the integrity of anyone unless they prove to me that they are dishonest. And listen, I've had that happen, okay? I've had some people that through their actions and through their words have demonstrated they're absolutely not honest. But that's not who I'm talking about. The vast majority of dispensational people are wonderful, God-loving, God-fearing people who love the Lord's word. And they honestly, sincerely believe that what they teach as a dispensationalist is God's truth. I know that. I acknowledge that. That doesn't change the fact that if you say, as dispensationalists do, as the dispensational paradigm says, and listen, I've been studying dispensationalism for over 40 years, okay? 45 years. I have read many, many, many of the major works by the major players in the dispensational world. I have had formal public debates with dispensationalists. And I've cited from their own works. Dispensationalism says, point number one, God sent Jesus into the world in his incarnation at what the Bible calls just the right time. The biblical term for it is in due time. In due time, God sent forth His Son. Romans chapter 5, 6 and following. So, dispensationalists admit that. God sent His Son into the world in the incarnation in what the omniscient, all-knowing God thought, said, and predicted was just the right time. And He sent Him to offer Israel the kingdom. Now, dispensationalists also admit and agree. Jesus then came at just the right time, and He offered the kingdom legitimately, objectively to Israel. And dispensationalists admit Israel could have accepted the kingdom. Point number 3. Dispensationalists tell us, due to Jewish unbelief, it made it, quote, impossible, unquote. That's Thomas Ice's own word, found in his book, End Times Controversy. Pardon me. I believe it's about page 185. Thomas Ice said that the Jewish unbelief made it impossible for Jesus to establish the kingdom, meaning the Jewish unbelief, the Jewish rejection of the kingdom offer made it impossible for Jesus to fulfill the mission that the omniscient God gave Him to accomplish. Therefore, point number 4, dispensationalists say that due to that Jewish rejection and rebellion, God stopped the prophetic clock of Daniel chapter 9, suspended the prophetic countdown, and established the church. Point number 5, the church was nowhere predicted in the Old Testament. Period. End of story. Now, if anyone doubts what I just said, contact me via email. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com, and ask for the documentation of my claim, of my statement, that dispensationalism says the church was never predicted anywhere in the Old Testament. Listen, Thomas Ice, Tim LaHaye, in their book, it's kind of a coffee table book entitled Charting the End Times. They say it in that book. So, because of Jewish unbelief, God suspended the 70-week countdown and established the church as an interim measure. He replaced Israel with the church until the rapture, at which point of time, is point number 6 and 7, the church will be raptured off of the earth, completely removed from the earth. God will begin dealing once again with Israel. And it is at the second coming of Christ, after the 7-year tribulation, that is, after the resumption of the 70 weeks of Daniel, after the appearance of the man of sin, after the great tribulation, the second coming occurs to deliver Israel from the man of sin, to deliver Israel from the great tribulation. Jesus will come and establish the kingdom on earth, dealing once again exclusively with Israel. And the Jew-Gentile equality that was established through the blood of Christ will no longer be in effect. Dwight Pentecost says in his tome, that thick, whereas Jew and Gentile equality exists now in the body of Christ through the work of Christ, that will not be the case in the millennial reign. In the millennial reign, Gentiles will be the servants of Israel. You catch the power of that. I suspect that about 99.9% of everyone watching this program today is a Gentile. We're not of Abrahamic descendancy. And that means that in the millennium proposed by dispensationalism, if it were to be established within the next 7 years, you and I, if we live to that point, you and I would be the servants, the slaves of Israel. Which, by the way, is the hope of those religious Jews in the world today. That the Gentiles will either be destroyed or become their servants and slaves. Okay, got to move on. So, this entire concept of dispensationalism, the doctrine says, now once again, let me emphasize this. Most dispensationalists have never given this any serious, logical, critical thought. They just accept what these major dispensational leaders and preachers are saying and writing. They've never sat down and thought, wait a minute, if Jesus came to do something but he couldn't do it, that means he failed. Recently on YouTube, I've been accosted for pointing out that dispensationalism says, teaches, implies, and infers, and demands logically that Jesus failed. One individual has appealed to Matthew chapter 23, verse 37, where Jesus said, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent unto thee, how often I would have gathered you together as a mother hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you would not. And this individual told me, see, that tells us that Israel rejected the kingdom. Well, it doesn't tell us that it thwarted God's purpose. It tells us that those who rejected the invitation to be gathered to Christ did not accept it. A couple of times now, I have pointed out what Paul said, and Paul taught nothing but the hope of Israel. Paul said, Israel has not attained to that for which he sought. What did Israel long for, ladies and gentlemen? The kingdom. And listen, in my book, Elijah Has Come, a solution for Romans 11, 25 to 27, I discuss Romans 11:7 in depth, pointing out that when Paul said, Israel has not attained, but the elect has, that means, that demands. God did not alter his plan for the kingdom. God did not postpone the kingdom. I mean, after all, if the elect were receiving, when Paul wrote 2,000 years ago, if the elect was receiving the kingdom when he wrote, that means the kingdom promise of Daniel 9 was not postponed. It did not fail. And in a future video, I'm going to be discussing Romans 11, verse 7 extensively. And I'll be making a very special discount offer on my book in which I discuss that as well. So, what I've been sharing with you over the last few weeks is, what would it mean? What would it mean if God inserted a gap? And what does it mean to say God failed? And I've got to point this out. This individual on YouTube says, dispensationalists simply do not say that God failed. And again, they don't verbalize it. The doctrine infers it. The doctrine demands it. Let me illustrate this. In 53 BC, Crassus, who was one of the original triumvirate in Crassus, Ptolemy, and Julius Caesar, the three of them ruled Rome together. Crassus, who was the richest man in Rome at the time, but he needed a great military victory to cement his popularity, to cement his public persona. Ptolemy was a great military general. Julius was a great general, both of whom had tremendous victories on their resume. Crassus needed a military victory. So he decided, without Senate approval, by the way, to invade Parthia, the inveterate enemy of Rome. So, even though he was offered auxiliary troops by one general that would have probably ensured his victory, he decided to take his own troops and invade Parthia. And they came to a place called Correa. And there, the Parthians utterly destroyed Crassus and his legions. It was considered, still is considered, one of the very worst defeats in the entire Roman history. Now, let me ask you something. Here's Crassus, a great, great politician, extremely wealthy, extremely powerful. Many considered him more powerful than Ptolemy and Caesar at the time due to his wealth. So here's Crassus. He makes all the plans, and he says, the time's right. I'm invading Parthia. He invades Parthia. Thousands upon thousands of troops are at his beck and call. They go to the chosen destination, and they die. Did Crassus fail? Well, you know he did. He went there to defeat the Parthians. He went there to establish Roman dominance, i.e., the Roman kingdom in Parthia. Guess what? He didn't do it. He failed. Likewise, our dispensational friends, although none of them openly, overtly say, oh, well, Jesus failed. They say he came at the right time. He came at the predicted time. He came at the time chosen by the Father. But the Jews defeated him, defeated his purpose, postponed his purpose. And it's been postponed now for 2,000 years. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me express it like this. Any way that you want to slice it or dice it. Since God set the time for the kingdom, he sent his son at the right time to establish the kingdom, and Jesus offered the kingdom, but the Jews rejected the kingdom. Therefore, Jesus could not do what he came to do and what the Father gave him to do. Then Jesus failed his own challenge. What did Jesus say? If I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. What was the work which the Father gave him to do? He sent his Son to establish the kingdom. Now, let me close today by reiterating last week's chart, just as a refresher, to set the stage for our next discussion. Okay? So let me read again. This is chart number 5 in my list. If there is no gap between the 69th and the 70th week of Daniel chapter 9. Now remember, dispensationalists such as Thomas Ice says there is a gap in the text. He never proves it, but he claims it. So I am presenting a hypothetical argument here. If there is no gap in Daniel, but the kingdom was postponed, then the Lord created a gap that was not in the original text of Daniel chapter 9. Now, let me read that again, ladies and gentlemen. And as I've said before, you must catch the power of this. If there was no gap in the original text of Daniel chapter 9 between the 69th and the 70th week, then the Lord created a gap between the 69th and the 70th week when the Jews rejected him. But wait a minute. If there was no gap in the original text of Daniel chapter 9, meaning that Jesus was absolutely correct when he said, the time is fulfilled, the kingdom of heaven has drawn near, that means that Jesus did not foresee a gap. Jesus did not know about a gap in Daniel chapter 9, and so he expressed the truth when he said the time is fulfilled, but then, lo and behold, the Jews rejected what he was offering them. The Jews rejected the Father's mission for Jesus to them, and God created a gap that was not in the original text of Daniel chapter 9. But wait a minute, ladies and gentlemen. If there was no gap in the original text of Daniel chapter 9 between the 69th and the 70th week, but God created one later, that means that since Daniel did not contain a gap, that means that his prophetic timeline, his prophetic countdown was false because Jesus did not fulfill it on time. And thus the prophecy of Daniel 9 that set the time for the establishment of the kingdom in the first century, that prophecy failed. I'm out of time. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.